Sometimes I want to sneak into places and not have any hoopla or...
Most people think Michael Jackson was just naturally gifted, that he was born different, and that's why he ended up on top. But that's not the full story. Michael didn't just have talent, he had rules, a specific way he approached everything he created. And those rules were so strict, so disciplined that they shaped every song, every dance move, and every video he ever made. Some of those rules were bold. Some of them made the people around him deeply uncomfortable. And a few of them came at a price nobody talks about. This is the story of how Michael Jackson built himself into something the world had never seen before. In 1979, Michael released Off the Wall. It sold over 20 million copies worldwide. By any normal standard, that was a massive win. But Michael didn't see it that way. The album got just one Grammy nomination. One. And for someone who had poured everything he had into that record, that felt like a slap in the face. So he made a quiet decision. From this point forward, nobody would have the final say over his work except him. Not the label, not the producers, not anyone. When Thriller came around, he went back to Epic Records and renegotiated everything. He wanted full control over the music, the visuals, the rollout, all of it. The label pushed back. They'd just given him a massive hit, so why change anything? But Michael wasn't chasing another hit. He was chasing something bigger than that. When Thriller became the best-selling album of all time, nobody questioned his judgment again. That one decision, to never compromise, became the foundation everything else was built on. And once that foundation was in place, the next thing he focused on was making sure the work itself was absolutely perfect, no matter what it took. People who worked with Michael in the studio described it the same way every time. Sessions that went 30, sometimes 40 hours straight. Engineers would fall asleep on the couch, wake up hours later, and Michael would still be there, adjusting a single vocal note, chasing a sound that only he could hear in his head. Quincy Jones, one of the greatest music producers who ever lived, said working with Michael was unlike anything he'd experienced before. Brilliant, but relentless in a way that pushed everyone around him to their absolute limit. The clearest example of this is Billie Jean. During the Thriller sessions, that now famous drum loop almost got cut entirely. The engineers didn't like it. Quincy had doubts. Nearly everyone in the room thought it was too simple, too repetitive. Michael refused to remove it. He heard something in that beat that the others couldn't. A tension, a pulse, something that would grab a listener before a single word was sung. Billie Jean spent 7 weeks at #1. That's what made his perfectionism different from just being difficult. He wasn't holding on to ideas out of stubbornness. He could genuinely hear the finished version of something before it existed, and he wasn't willing to stop until the music caught up with what was in his head. But the studio was only one part of it, because Michael had the exact same obsessive approach to something most artists never think twice about. At a time when most artists threw together a quick performance clip and called it a music video, Michael was thinking like a filmmaker. When it came time to bring Thriller to life visually, he didn't hire a music video director. He hired John Landis, the Hollywood director behind An American Werewolf in London. Because in Michael's mind, he wasn't making a video. He was making a short film. Epic Records took one look at the budget and refused to pay for it. So Michael paid for it himself. The video ran 14 minutes, told a complete story, and when MTV aired it, people watched it like it was a cinema release. It didn't just change what his career looked like, it changed what the entire music industry thought a video could be. But the visual side of things went much deeper than big budgets. Michael studied movement the way other people study for exams. He broke down Fred Astaire's footwork frame by frame. He watched James Brown perform over and over to understand stage command. He studied Marcel Marceau to understand how to tell a story without saying a word. Then he took all of those influences and mixed them together into something completely his own. The moonwalk didn't just appear one night on the Motown 25 special. It was the result of years of quiet, obsessive study that nobody saw happening behind the scenes. His rule was simple. Every song needed its own world. The sound and the visual had to work together as one thing, not two separate pieces. And that standard applied to everything he touched, which made what came next in his process all the more complicated to talk about. Every artist takes from what came before them. That's just how creativity works. But Michael took that process further than most, and the lines around it were not always clean. James Brown's footwork, Jackie Wilson's stage energy, the raw movement of street dancers he'd quietly watch from tour buses and backstage hallways. Michael absorbed all of it, broke it down, and rebuilt it into something that looked entirely original. For the most part, the world gave him credit for that. It was seen as artistic evolution, the natural way talent grows. But things got more complicated over time. Take the Rockwell situation. Rockwell, whose real name was Kennedy Gordy, released a song called Somebody's Watching Me in 1984. Michael sang background vocals on it. The song became a hit largely because of his voice on the track. But the conversation around credit and compensation that followed was messy and didn't sit well with people close to the situation. Then there were the broader songwriting disputes, stories of melodies and ideas that traveled from a collaborator's early demo into a finished Michael Jackson record without a clear paper trail back to where they came from. Some of those cases were settled quietly, others were never resolved at all. Michael rarely addressed any of it publicly, and for a lot of people, that silence said enough on its own. The truth is complicated. His ability to absorb and transform influences was genuinely remarkable, but remarkable talent and clean credit don't always go hand in hand. And while those questions continued to follow him, Michael was already focused on something that worried his label even more than the controversy. Most successful artists find something that works and stick with it. Michael Jackson found something that worked and walked away from it before anyone else could get comfortable. Look at how the albums actually moved. Off the Wall was polished, warm, sophisticated. A young artist stepping into the adult world and saying, I belong here.
Of his record-breaking international concert tours and his album sales, and his heartfelt efforts to make this world a better place.
Thriller kept the quality but added rock guitars, cinematic storytelling, and a scale nobody expected. Bad pulled back, got leaner and more direct. Then Dangerous threw the entire playbook out. New producers, new sounds, new everything, with no obvious connection to what came before it. Every album was a conscious left turn. Not a mistake, not label pressure. A deliberate choice to make the previous version of himself feel like old news before anyone else could do it for him. He reportedly told people he worked with directly, if I've already done it, it's dead to me. Move on. The goal was never to repeat a success. The goal was to make the last success look like a warm-up act. But what most people miss is that the reinvention wasn't just about keeping the music fresh, it was about staying in control of his own story. By constantly changing, he made sure no one could define him before he defined himself. No critic, no journalist, no executive could put him in a box because the box kept changing shape. The only people who ever really knew what he was building next were the ones he trusted enough to let inside. And that group was much smaller than anyone realized. Michael treated information the same way he treated everything else, with complete control. While other artists casually shared studio updates and let journalists peek behind the curtain, Michael ran his creative process like a classified operation. Studios were locked, track names were faked. People who worked on his albums described an atmosphere where even they weren't told the full picture of what they were contributing to. A string arranger might record their part without ever hearing the rest of the song. A backing vocalist might not even know which album the track was for. During the History rollout, fake concepts were deliberately put out to mislead the press. Decoy track titles circulated. Even people inside the project were kept in the dark about certain things. And it worked, because Michael understood something most artists never figure out. Silence creates hunger. When you give people nothing, they fill that emptiness with anticipation. By the time a Michael Jackson project actually arrived, the world had been waiting and wondering for so long that the release felt like an event rather than just a new album. The secrecy wasn't just about music either. His personal life, Neverland, his daily routines, all of it was carefully managed. What the public saw was exactly what he chose to show them, and nothing more. Every rule Michael lived by produced something remarkable, but every single one of them had a cost attached to it. And as the years went on, those costs kept growing. The perfectionism that gave the world Off the Wall, Thriller, and Bad also wore down the people closest to him. Quincy Jones, the man who helped build 3 of the greatest albums ever made, eventually walked away from the partnership.
Dear Quincy, we're all part of history in the making. Thriller is one of the biggest albums ever. Thank you for your support, effort, and hard work. Michael Jackson.
A collaboration that produced more magic than almost anything else in pop music history ended quietly, and later Quincy made comments in interviews about credit and compensation that made it clear the split hadn't been a smooth one. The reinvention rule, as smart as it was for his career, meant he was constantly replacing the people around him. New producers, new collaborators, new creative teams every few years. The people who had learned how to work with him, who understood his process, kept getting cycled out. That kind of constant change doesn't just affect the music, It affects trust, stability, and the ability to maintain any kind of lasting relationship. The secrecy that started as a clever strategy slowly turned into something more isolating. Neverland, for all its scale and spectacle, eventually functioned more like a fortress than a home. The same environment that protected his creative work from outside interference also cut him off from the kind of normal human connection that keeps people grounded. And the no-compromise rule, the one that started everything, became increasingly hard to separate from a complete inability to hear any outside perspective at all.
I'm not a racist person. I could never be a racist. I love all races of people, from Arabs to Jewish people.
People around him in his later years described a world where disagreement simply wasn't welcome, where the only acceptable answer was yes. That's not creative confidence anymore. That's something else. Michael Jackson didn't become the greatest entertainer of all time by accident. He built a system, followed it ruthlessly, and refused to let anyone dismantle it. The rules worked. The numbers prove it. The legacy proves it. But systems built on perfection have no room for humanity. And somewhere between the greatest album ever made and the fortress he built around himself, the man and the myth became impossible to separate. The question worth sitting with isn't how he got to the top. It's what it actually cost him to stay there. Because nobody builds walls that high without something on the inside worth protecting, or something on the inside they're desperately trying to escape.